Hello friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Amrit Purandare. In this tutorial, we are going to learn basics of unit testing. So let's get started and see the agenda for the tutorial. We will start our discussion with what is unit, then we will see what is meant by unit testing, followed by why unit testing is required. We will see few advantages of the unit testing, and then we will see tools and techniques available for the unit testing. So let's get started and understand what is meant by the unit. In software system, we have the code blocks, and unit means the smallest piece of a code that we can test, that we can logically isolate and test. In most of the programming languages, we have the functions, subroutines, a method and the classes. And here unit means either a function, a method or a class. In terminology, unit is also called as a component. So you must have heard about the term component testing. So there component means the smallest piece of code that can be logically isolated. So from programming perspective, a unit can be a function, method or a class. So we now know what is unit. So let's see now what is mean by the unit testing. A unit test is a way of testing a unit, that is, testing a function or a subroutine, etc. As mentioned earlier, unit is also called as a component, so unit testing is also called as a component testing. In generally, unit testing is done by the developers in the coding phase itself, and to test the code in isolation, developer usually use stubs or mock objects in the unit test, which keeps the component, that is code under test, in isolation, so that the component under the unit test do not rely on the other parts of the program. So here stub or mock means the fake object. So from the example perspective, let's see, for example, I want to download some data in a function and I want to display that data into the user console. Okay, so here my function is dependent on a backend API to give me some code, to give me some data that we need to display. So what I will, if I want to write the unit test, what I will do, I will create a fake object of the backend, get the data and will display that data. Don't worry about the stubbing and mocking as of now. We will have the in-depth tutorials on it in the upcoming tutorials. The goal of the unit test is to test the piece of the code in isolation. Okay, so before sending the build to the QA, I should have some system implemented which will test my code and see if it is logically correct and gives me the required output. So that's the basic goal of the unit test. So now we know what is meant by unit, what is meant by unit testing. So let's see some code and understand it from the coding perspective. So for example, I have the calculator class in which there are four mathematical operations. So here, if we closely see, there are four methods which we can test in isolation, and these are called as a unit. And whatever the code which we will write to test these functions in isolation will be called as a unit test. Even this calculator class, it will be also able, we will be also able to test it. So even this calculator class itself is a unit. Okay, so even before writing a unit test cases, we need to see why unit testing is required. Okay, so let's go ahead and see why unit testing is required. In a project, we get a new developers onboarded and we assign some tasks to them. Okay, so these developers keeps on changing the code without having the prior understanding of the code, and they will their code will impact on the other code components, which will impact on the overall software system, causing a lot of defects. So that is the first thing. The second, from a new developer perspective, if I want to understand the code, I have to debug it. and which will take a time. But if there is a unit testing framework implemented in a project, what I have to do, I have to go to that framework, check the code. I will understand what are the inputs to a method or a function. I will understand what are the outputs, what are the operations that are performed there. So that will be the advantage. If unit testing is there, I the debugging time is reduced. The third and the biggest advantage, unit testing avoids violation of a solid principle. So we know, to unit test a code, I need a smallest piece that can be tested in isolation. And if unit testing is there, it will force developer to follow the solid principle to get that smallest piece of a code by following the solid principle. If you guys don't know about the solid principle, please go ahead and see my tutorials. You will see the link into the description. If unit testing is not implemented in the project, developers will code only to get the working software without focusing on code quality. Okay, so these are the few basic points which will give us some idea that unit testing is a must in our project. Okay, so these are few things. Now let's go ahead and see some advantages of the unit testing. So first advantage, with unit test we can evaluate the logic of our software very quickly even before sending the build to the QA. That is the first advantage. The second advantage, unit testing improves the quality of the code. Third, unit testing helps in maintaining and modifying the software code. Fourth, unit test with unit test we make sure that the code that we are writing that works now, but it will keep on continuing to work even after the multiple iteration of a code changes. So generally we nowadays we follow the agile practices wherein our code goes under multiple iterations, and we have to make sure that that code works even after those n number of iterations. So if we have the unit testing framework implemented, and if I'm changing the code, I don't have to worry about the breaking the legacy code or the code that was working before. If my unit test cases are working, that code will also work. The fifth thing, unit testing helps simplify the debugging process. We already seen it. If my test case is failing, then only I have to go and check what are then only I have to go and debug the code to see what are the issues that I have created. So these are the few advantages of the unit test cases. Now let's go ahead and see some tools and techniques that are available for the unit testing. So what I have done, I have created a tabular structure wherein I have mentioned some platforms and their available unit testing tools or frames. So if you are a Java developer, we know that there is a JUnit, Mockito, PowerMock frameworks available for unit testing. There is a REST assured framework which will test your REST APIs. If you are a Python developer, there is a unit test framework available for Python. If you are an Android developer, JUnit, Mockito and PowerMock, these are some tools that are useful for the unit testing. There is a Espresso and UI Automator. These are the few tools for Android to UI test your code. For Java and Android, there is a Jacoco framework which helps you to give you the code coverage of your entire code and the unit test that you have written. So these are few tools. In upcoming tutorials, what we are going to do, we are going to learn JUnit, Mockito, PowerMock. We will also have some tutorials based on Espresso, and we will also see how to get the code coverage by using the Jacoco framework. So that's it for this tutorial. If you guys learned something from this tutorial, please press the like button and subscribe to my channel. This is Amrit Purandare signing off. Thank you.